Welcome, everyone. Today's explainer, brought to you by Forge College, is all about rolling up our sleeves and tackling a super vital part of the smart contract security audit capstone. Specifically, we're diving deep into practical authorization debugging and flaw identification. Our central goal today is straightforward, but honestly, it's profoundly important. We are going to take your theoretical test cases and turn them into cold, hard, empirical evidence. So let's dive right into this and see exactly how we transform a simple what-if hypothesis into absolute cryptographic proof.
Here is our game plan for today. We're going to start with moving from design to debugging, then meet the vulnerable contract. Next up, we'll run the test harness and collect trace-level evidence. Then we'll wrap up the whole process by writing the debug report and discussing mitigation and next steps. Let's get to it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, from design to debugging, transitioning from theoretical tests to empirical evidence.
Now, if you recall our previous lesson, we actually spent a ton of time building out theoretical designs, right? We had those carefully crafted role matrices and our hypotheses. But, well, a design is really just a hypothesis at the end of the day. It's just a hunch. What we really need is empirical evidence. These are your logs, your execution traces, the actual raw data. The theory tells us what we think will happen in the contract, but to categorically prove a vulnerability exists, for that we absolutely need the cold, hard execution data to back it up.
Moving right along to Section 2, meet the vulnerable contract. We are arriving at the digital crime scene.
Welcome, fellow investigators. Step right up to the crime scene. Just take a look at this culprit right here. The developer wrote a setTreasury function, but do you notice anything missing? Yeah, there is a glaringly absent only owner role check. I mean, it's literally like building a massive, state-of-the-art, impenetrable bank vault and then just leaving the front door wedged open with a brick. Because this is a public function with absolutely zero access control guards, literally any attacker can just wander in and point the entire treasury to their own address. It is a total disaster waiting to happen.
On to Section 3, running the test harness. It's time to gather our tools to catch the culprit.
Okay, so to systematically prove this flaw exists, we need our high-tech detective toolkit, which in this case is a tightly controlled hardhat testing environment. Here's our strict four-step methodology. Step 1, we run the raw test, just to see the initial failure. Step 2, we instrument that test so it prints receipts. Step 3, we collect the deep trace data. And finally, Step 4, we write the debug report. This exact workflow is what turns a simple, annoying failing test into an undeniable piece of actionable evidence.
You can kind of think of a raw log as a frantic 911 call. It tells you something bad happened, like, hey, your test failed, but it doesn't give you much else to go on. An instrumented log, on the other hand, is like uncovering high-definition 4K security footage of the entire event. It shows you everything: the transaction status, the event logs, and the exact state changes right before and after the call. To get the full, complete story of the exploit, you absolutely must instrument your tests. There's just no way around it.
Now, to actually read that security footage, you need to fully understand the transaction receipt. This is the definitive record of a transaction's execution on the blockchain. The absolute crucial point here is the status field. A status of 1 means success, and a status of 0 means the transaction reverted. By checking receipt.status in our instrumented test, we can mathematically determine if a malicious transaction successfully bypassed our security. If it returns a 1 when our negative test explicitly expected it to fail and return a 0, we've caught our bug.
Let's move to Section 4, collecting trace-level evidence. We are dusting for cryptographic prints.
All right, it's time to pull out the magnifying glass. Here is our smoking gun. We clearly see a TX status 1, which means the malicious transaction executed perfectly without a hitch. We also see the Treasury aftercall has been swapped straight to the attacker's address. And finally, we hit the assertion error. Our negative test expected a revert, but it got a success. This categorically proves that the attacker easily changed the Treasury without a single drop of authorization. We have got them dead to rights.
Section 5, writing the debug report. Time to file the official technical report.
You know the old saying, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Well, it's true here too. It is time to file the official police report. To make the exploit perfectly reproducible for everyone else, we have to meticulously map out our suspects. We map the role, like deployer versus attacker, to the exact signer index used in our test. And we provide the respective address strings.
By clearly documenting who is who in our testing environment, we completely remove all the guesswork for the next engineer trying to recreate the exploit.
Beyond just naming the suspects, your report needs 4 core components to be truly useful. You need the exact shell commands to run, the deployed contract addresses, the account indices used, and the precise function calls sequence. I really want to emphasize this. A minimal, reproducible sequence is the single most critical part of your entire debug report. It takes a vague complaint like, hey, the contract is broken, and turns it into a highly specific, actionable engineering task.
Finally, Section 6, Mitigation and Next Steps. We're fixing the blueprint. So we've found the crime, and we've gathered all the empirical evidence. Now we shift gears from finding the flaw to actually implementing the repair. To do that effectively, we rely heavily on the least privilege principle. This is a foundational security concept that dictates that a user or a smart contract role should only ever have the absolute minimum access rights necessary to perform their specific function. We don't just throw broad, sweeping access blocks everywhere. Instead, we apply laser precision to ensure we only grant the exact permissions needed. Nothing more, nothing less.
Applying that principle gives us this beautifully simple fix. To lock down the vulnerable setTreasury function, all we really need to do is add the onlyOwner modifier, or a simple require statement checking that the sender is actually an admin. It's literally a one-line code change, but it entirely remediates the vulnerability. The vault door is officially closed, locked, and bolted. We always include this clear, concise mitigation step right at the very end of our debug report, just so the development team knows exactly how to proceed to patch it up.
Now, before you pat yourself on the back and call it a day, your debug report must clear this final checkpoint. Let's review the checklist. It needs, number 1, a fully reproducible sequence. Number 2, trace-level evidence explicitly tied to the call. Number 3, a role-specific failure trace that clearly identifies the actors involved. And number 4, a concrete mitigation note securely rooted in least privilege. If you hit all 4 of those marks, your report is completely bulletproof. So, I leave you with this final thought to ponder. Is your failing test just a hopeful hypothesis, or do you have the actual empirical evidence to prove the flaw? Always remember, in smart contract auditing, evidence is your currency. A failing test without a trace is a weak argument, but a fully documented debug report, that is undeniable. I highly encourage you all to head over to forge.college to dive deeper into this subject and to prep for our next lesson where we'll take these exact findings and turn them into a repeatable authorization checklist. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.